I'm going to keep this honest and to the point because I know the biggest hesitation when you're looking at a full-frame mirrorless is whether it will actually fit into the way you work, not just the specs on a sheet. You've probably seen a lot of hype about the best low-light camera ever, but the real question is if that claim translates to the kind of shooting you do every day. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon, and I'll walk through exactly where the Sony A7S lands when you put it in the field. First off, the A7S sits in a niche that Sony carved out years ago, a sensor that sacrifices megapixels for raw sensitivity. The 12.2 MP full-frame XMOR sensor is deliberately modest, but that design choice means the camera handles darkness in a way most 24-megapixel bodies can't. If you spend any time shooting events after the sun goes down, or you're a filmmaker who needs to capture a cityscape at twilight without pulling in a flood of artificial light, this sensor will give you clean images with very little grain. In practical terms, I've used it on a small venue gig where the stage lights were the only illumination. The footage stayed usable even when I pushed the ISO to 6400, and the 5-axis in-body stabilization kept the handheld walk-around shots steady enough that I didn't have to rig a gimbal for a simple run-and-talk interview. That stabilization is one of the strongest practical benefits. It's not just a marketing line, it actually lets you shoot video on the go. I took the camera out on a bike ride through a dimly lit alley, using the built-in zoom to frame a few street performers. The result was surprisingly smooth, and the footage didn't wobble the way it usually does when you're juggling a lightweight mirrorless with a handheld rig. For anyone who needs to move quickly, documentarians, wedding videographers, or even vloggers who can't lug a tripod everywhere, that 5-axis system is a real time saver. Autofocus confidence is another area where the A7S shines, especially for video. The fast hybrid AF system blends phase detect points on the sensor with contrast detection, giving you a focus lock that feels reliable even when you're pulling focus manually. I tried a shallow depth Hoffield interview scenario with a 35mm f1.8 lens, and the focus stayed locked on the subject's eyes as they turned their head. In still photo mode, the same system is quick enough for casual portraits, though it's not as aggressive as the newer models that boast hundreds of focus points. If you're shooting fast action sports, wildlife, you'll notice the focus hunting a bit more than you would on a newer high-speed body. Lens ecosystem is a practical consideration that can't be ignored. The A7S uses Sony's mount, which means you have access to a huge range of lenses, from legacy mount glass with an adapter to the latest G Master series. For low-light work, you'll likely pair it with a fast prime like a 50mm f1.4 or a 24mm f1.8, both of which are relatively affordable now that the A7 line is several generations old. The downside is you won't get the ultra-wide, high-resolution lenses that some newer full-frame cameras support without a price jump. If you already own Sony E lenses, this camera slots right in. If you're starting from scratch, you'll have to budget for a couple of good glass pieces before you see the sensor's true potential. Menu navigation on Sony cameras has a reputation for being a bit of a maze, and the A7S is no exception. The button layout is logical once you get used to it, but the menu depth can feel like you're digging through layers to change something simple, like white balance. I found myself spending a few minutes at the start of each shoot tweaking custom keys so I could grab ISO and exposure compensation without diving into the full menu. If you're a beginner who wants a camera that tells you exactly what to do with a single dial, this could feel frustrating. On the flip side, for a creator who likes to fine-tune settings on the fly, the level of control is a strength, provided you're willing to spend that initial learning curve. Battery life is an everyday worry for anyone who shoots video on location. The A7S uses Sony's NP-FZ100 cell, which gives you roughly 380 shots or about an hour and a half of 4K recording, according to Sony's own tests. In practice, I got around 45 minutes of continuous 4K footage before the battery warned me. That's enough for a short interview or a single event segment, but you'll want spare batteries if you're planning a full day of shooting. The camera does have a USB-C port that can power it from an external battery pack, which mitigates the issue if you're comfortable carrying that extra gear. Now, who should actually consider buying this camera? If you're a videographer or photographer who consistently works in low-light environments, concerts, night street scenes, indie film sets, this sensor's sensitivity and